The rain poured down on the city streets like tears from heaven. DeShawn Williams sat on the cold concrete steps of the First National Bank building. His torn jacket barely kept him warm against the freezing November wind. His stomach growled, with hunger that felt like a wild animal clawing at his insides. He had not eaten in 2 days, and his body was weak from the cold and starvation. The cardboard sign next to him read, "Anything helps, God bless," but the words were starting to blur from the rain. DeShawn pulled his knees to his chest, trying to stay warm. His 25-year-old body shivered as another gust of wind cut through his thin clothes. He watched people walk by in their warm coats and expensive shoes. They held umbrellas over their heads and talked on phones worth more money than DeShawn had seen in months. Not one person looked at him. Not one person seemed to care that a human being was sitting in the freezing rain with nowhere to go. 6 months ago, DeShawn had a job at the Richardson factory. He worked hard every day making parts for machines. He had a small apartment and enough food to eat. He even had a girlfriend named Sarah who made him laugh and dream about the future. But then the factory closed down with no warning. 300 people lost their jobs in one day. DeShawn lost everything. Sarah left him when he could not pay rent anymore. His landlord kicked him out onto the streets. His whole world fell apart in just a few weeks. Now he sat outside this fancy bank, building every day, hoping someone would give him enough money to buy food. Most days he made nothing. Some days a kind person would give him $1 or a piece of bread. He had learned to be grateful for any small kindness, because kindness was rare in this cold city. Suddenly a loud crash came from inside the bank building. The sound was like glass breaking or papers falling everywhere. Then DeShawn heard something that made his heart stop completely. A man was crying. Not just crying, but sobbing like his whole world had fallen apart into a million pieces. The sound was so full of pain and desperation that DeShawn felt it deep in his own heart, even though he did not know who was making that terrible sound. The crying got louder and more desperate. DeShawn looked through the glass doors of the bank building. The lobby was all shiny marble and gold decorations that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Through the glass he saw a white man in expensive black suit sitting on the marble floor. The man was holding his head in his hands like he was trying to keep his skull from cracking open. His whole body was shaking as he cried. Papers were scattered all around him on the floor like fallen leaves. Some of the papers had red stamps on them that DeShawn could not read from outside. DeShawn had heard crying before in his life. He had cried himself when he became homeless and realized how cruel the world could be. He had cried when his mother died 3 years ago and he had no money for her funeral. He had cried when Sarah told him she could not love a man with no job and no future. But this crying was different from anything he had ever heard. This was the sound of a man whose soul was breaking into pieces. This was the sound of someone who had lost everything that mattered to them. Most people would have walked away from that sound. Most people would have minded their own business and kept walking down the street. Most people would have thought that a rich man in expensive suit had no right to cry when there were homeless people freezing outside. But DeShawn was not most people. Even though he had nothing left in this world, DeShawn still had a heart full of compassion for others who were suffering. Something deep inside his chest told him he needed to help this crying man, even though he did not know who he was or why he was in so much pain. DeShawn stood up from his spot on the concrete steps. His legs were stiff from sitting in the cold for so many hours. He walked slowly to the glass doors of the bank building. His wet shoes made squishy sounds with every step he took. The security guard at the door was a big man with mean eyes and a uniform that looked like it belonged to a police officer. When he saw DeShawn walking toward the door, the guard stepped in front of it and held up his hand. "Hey, you can't go in there," the guard said in a voice that sounded like he enjoyed telling people no. "You don't belong in here." This is a place for real customers, not for beggars who smell bad and make decent people uncomfortable. The guard looked DeShawn up and down like he was something dirty that someone had left on the sidewalk. Go find somewhere else to cause trouble, the guard said, before I call the police and have them arrest you for disturbing the peace. But DeShawn heard that desperate crying getting even louder from inside the building. Something inside him said he needed to help this person, no matter what the security guard threatened to do to him. Please, sir, DeShawn said politely. I just want to help that man who is crying. I know what it feels like when your heart is breaking. And you need someone to care about you. The security guard laughed like DeShawn had told him a funny joke. You want to help someone, the guard said. You can't even help yourself. Look at you. You're a homeless beggar with nothing to offer anyone. That man in there is worth more money than you could count. What could you possibly do for him? Sometimes the people with nothing are the ones who understand pain the best, DeShawn said softly. Sometimes the people who have been broken are the ones who know how to help other broken people heal. The security guard was about to say something mean when the crying from inside got so loud that even he looked concerned. Fine, the guard said. But if you cause any trouble, I will throw you out on the street so hard you will wish you never came near this place. DeShawn pushed past the guard and walked across the shiny marble floor. His wet shoes left small puddles with each step he took. The crying echoed off the high ceiling and expensive walls, making it sound even more heartbreaking. DeShawn followed the sound until he found the man who was making it. The crying man looked up when he heard the footsteps coming toward him. His face was red and swollen from tears that would not stop falling. His expensive silk tie was crooked and his perfect hair was messy like he had been pulling at it with his hands. His blue eyes were filled with more pain than DeShawn had ever seen in another person. This was James Richardson, the richest man in the entire city. He owned 3 big companies that made millions of dollars every year. He had more money than most people could count in their whole lifetime. His picture was in the newspaper almost every week talking about his business success and his expensive lifestyle. But right now James Richardson looked like the poorest man in the world. He looked like someone who had lost everything that made life worth living. What do you want? James said through his tears. His voice was rough and broken like he had been crying for hours. Can't you see I'm having the worst day of my entire life? Can't you see that everything I worked for is falling apart right in front of my eyes? DeShawn sat down on the cold marble floor right next to James. He did not care that his wet clothes might leave stains on the expensive floor. He did not care that the security guard was watching him with angry eyes. He only cared about this man who was in so much pain. I heard you crying from outside, DeShawn said in the gentlest voice he could make. I know what it sounds like when someone's heart is broken into pieces. I know what it feels like when you think your whole world is ending. James looked at DeShawn with surprise and confusion. Here was a homeless man with torn clothes and no money sitting next to him on the bank floor. A man who clearly had nothing was trying to comfort him when he was at his lowest point. You don't understand what's happening to me, James said. I just lost everything that I spent my whole life building. My companies are going bankrupt, and I don't know how to stop it. My wife packed her bags and left me this morning. She said she couldn't love a man who cared more about money than he cared about his own family. My children won't even talk to me anymore. They said I was never there for them when they needed me most. James picked up one of the papers from the floor. It had red letters stamped across it that said foreclosure notice. The bank is taking away all my properties, James continued. My investors are pulling their money out of my companies. My employees are quitting because they haven't been paid in weeks. I have billions of dollars on paper, but I can't access any of it because everything is tied up in legal problems. I have all this money, but I have nothing that actually matters. In life, DeShawn nodded slowly as he listened to James pour out his heart. Money can't buy the things that make life worth living, DeShawn said. I learned that lesson the hard way when I had money and lost it all. But I also learned something else that might help you. You had money, James asked with shock and disbelief in his voice. But you're homeless. How did you go from having money to living on the streets? I used to work at one of your factories, DeShawn said quietly. The Richardson manufacturing plant on the south side of the city. I worked there for 5 years making parts for machines. It was good, honest work, and I was proud of what I did every day. James stopped crying for a moment and stared at DeShawn with wide eyes. You worked at my factory, he said. But I had to close that factory down 6 months ago. I needed to cut costs to save money for my other businesses. It was a hard decision. But I thought it was the right thing to do. That factory closing is what made me homeless, DeShawn said without any anger in his voice. When you shut it down, I lost my job along with 299 other people. I couldn't find another job that paid enough to cover my rent. My girlfriend left me when I couldn't provide for her anymore. My landlord kicked me out when I couldn't pay rent. Everything I had built in my life disappeared almost overnight. James felt a wave of guilt wash over him like cold water. I'm so sorry, he said. I never thought about what would happen to the individual workers when I made that decision. I just looked at numbers on a spreadsheet. I didn't think about the real people behind those numbers. But you know what? I learned living on these streets for the past 6 months, DeShawn said. I learned something that might help you save your businesses and get your family back. What could you possibly know that could help me? James asked. But there was something in DeShawn's voice that made him want to listen carefully. What could someone who lost everything teach someone who's about to lose everything? DeShawn smiled for the first time in days. I learned the secret of what makes businesses really successful. I learned what makes families strong. I learned what makes life worth living. And I can teach you these things if you want to learn them. Please tell me, James said desperately. I will try anything at this point. I have nothing left to lose. The first thing you need to understand is that you forgot about the most important part of any business, DeShawn said. You forgot about the people. When you closed my factory to save money, you thought you were being smart, but you actually made a huge mistake that started all your problems. James leaned forward with interest. What kind of mistake? You fired 300 people from that factory, DeShawn explained. But those 300 people were not just employees. They were also customers. We bought groceries from your Richardson markets. We bought clothes from your Richardson department stores. We bought gas from your Richardson gas stations. When you fired us, you didn't just lose employees. You lost 300 loyal customers who had been supporting all your businesses for years. James's eyes grew wide as he realized what DeShawn was saying. Oh my God, he whispered. I never thought about it that way. But that's not all, DeShawn continued. Each of those 300 workers had families, wives and husbands and children who also shopped at your stores. So really, you lost about 1,000 customers when you closed that one factory. And those customers told their friends and neighbors about how you treated your workers. So you lost even more customers who decided they didn't want to support a business that didn't care about working people. James felt like DeShawn was opening his eyes to see things clearly for the first time in years. What else did I do wrong? He asked. You raised prices on everything to make more profit per sale, DeShawn said. But you made everything so expensive that regular working people like me couldn't afford to shop at your stores anymore. You decided to focus only on rich customers who could pay high prices. But here's the problem with that plan. What's the problem? James asked. There just aren't enough rich people in this city to keep 3 big companies running successfully. DeShawn explained. Rich people might spend more money per purchase, but there are only a few hundred of them. Working people might spend less money per purchase, but there are tens of thousands of us. When you price out the working people, you lose the foundation that your whole business empire was built on. James grabbed another piece of paper from the floor and started writing down everything DeShawn was telling him. "This makes so much sense," he said. "Why didn't any of my expensive business consultants tell me these things?" "Because your expensive business consultants never lived on the street," DeShawn replied. "They never had to choose between buying food or paying rent. They never had to count every penny to make sure they could survive another day. They don't understand what regular working people need or want, because they never lived like regular working people." "What else?" James asked eagerly. "What other mistakes did I make?" "You moved all your offices to the most expensive part of town," DeShawn said. "You hired only people who went to fancy colleges and came from wealthy families. You stopped listening to ideas from regular workers who actually knew how to make your products better and serve your customers better. You surrounded yourself with people who only told you what you wanted to hear instead of what you needed to hear." James nodded as he wrote down more notes. "That's exactly what happened," he said. "I got so caught up in trying to look successful that I forgot how to actually be successful." "Success isn't about looking important," DeShawn said. "Success is about making other people's lives better. Success is about solving problems that real people actually have. Success is about treating everyone with respect and dignity, no matter how much money they have in their bank account." "But how do I fix all these problems now?" James asked. "Everything is falling apart so fast. The bank wants me to pay back millions of dollars. My investors are demanding their money back. My employees are quitting every day. How can I possibly turn this around?" DeShawn stood up and reached out his hand to help. James got up from the floor. "Nothing is ever too late if you're willing to change everything about how you do business," DeShawn said. "I can help you fix this mess, but it's going to require you to completely change the way you think about success and money, and what really matters in life." James took DeShawn's hand and pulled himself up from the marble floor. "Tell me what I need to do," he said. "I'm ready to change everything if it means I can save my businesses and get my family back." "First we need to reopen that factory," DeShawn said. "But this time we do it the right way. We pay workers wages that allow them to support their families with dignity. We treat every employee like they are a valuable member of a team instead of just a number on a payroll. We listen to their ideas about how to make better products and serve customers better." "But I don't have the money to reopen the factory," James said. "All my cash is tied up in legal problems." "Yes, you do have the money," DeShawn replied firmly. "You just have it tied up in things that don't actually make you happy or successful. You have 3 massive mansions, but you can only live in one house at a time. Sell the other 2 houses and use that money to reopen the factory." James looked shocked by this suggestion. "But those houses show people how successful I am," he protested. "No, they don't," DeShawn said with conviction. "Those houses show people how much money you spent on yourself. Real success is not what you own. Real success is what you give to others. Real success is how many people you help improve their lives. Real success is making the world better than you found it." "What else should I sell?" James asked as he started to understand DeShawn's point. "You have 10 expensive cars sitting in your garages," DeShawn said. "You can only drive 1 car at a time. Sell 8 of those cars and use the money to improve working conditions at the factory. You have a yacht that costs $100,000 a year just to maintain, but you only use it twice a year. Sell the yacht and use that money to create a health insurance plan for all your workers." James was writing down every suggestion as fast as he could. "This is brilliant," he said. "I was holding on to all these expensive things to prove I was successful, but they were actually preventing me from being truly successful. Now here's the next step," DeShawn continued. "You need to lower prices at all your stores so that regular working families can afford to shop there again. Stop trying to squeeze every possible penny out of every sale. Make less profit on each item but sell many more items to many more customers. You'll actually make more total profit and people will love you for treating them fairly. But won't that hurt my profit margins? James asked. Think about it this way, DeShawn explained. Would you rather sell one item for $50 profit to a rich person, or sell 10 items for $10 profit, each to working families? Either way, you make $50, but in the second scenario, you have 10 happy customers instead of 1. Those 10 customers will tell their friends about your fair prices and good service. Your business will grow much faster when regular people can afford what you're selling. James felt excitement growing in his chest for the first time in months. What about my employees? He asked. How do I get good people to work for me again? You make them feel important and valued, DeShawn said. You don't just give them jobs. You give them opportunities to grow and learn new skills. You promote people who work hard regardless of whether they went to fancy colleges. You listen to their ideas and actually use the good ones. You make them feel like partners in building something great instead of just workers who follow orders. Some of the best ideas for improving businesses come from the people who do the actual work every day, DeShawn continued. But most business owners never ask their workers what they think. They assume that expensive consultants know more than the people who actually make the products and serve the customers. James was nodding eagerly as he took notes. What about my family? He asked quietly. How do I fix things with my wife and children? That's the most important thing to me, even more than saving my businesses. DeShawn sat back down and motioned for James to sit beside him again. That's going to be the hardest part, DeShawn said gently. But it starts with one simple change that will transform your whole life. What change? James asked desperately. Stop trying to buy their love with expensive gifts and fancy vacations, DeShawn said. Start giving them the one thing that money can't buy, but that they need more than anything else. What's that? James asked. Your time and attention, DeShawn replied. Your presence in their daily lives. Your interest in what matters to them. Your love and support when they face challenges. Your wife and children don't need more money or more things. They need their husband and father to actually be present in their lives. James felt fresh tears starting to flow down his cheeks. But I was working so hard to provide for them, he said. I thought making more money was how I showed them I loved them. And that's exactly why they left you, DeShawn said with compassion in his voice. They already had enough money to live comfortably. What they didn't have was enough of you. They needed you to show up to their school plays and soccer games. They needed you to have dinner with them and ask about their day. They needed you to put down your phone and actually listen when they talk to you. James buried his face in his hands. I've been such a fool, he said. I had everything that really mattered, and I threw it all away chasing after more money that I didn't even need. It's not too late to change, DeShawn said firmly. But you have to prove to them that you've really changed. Words won't be enough after all the promises you've broken. They need to see you living differently every single day. How do I prove to them that I've changed? James asked. You start by helping other people who need help, DeShawn said. Instead of just taking money out of this community, you start putting money and time back into it. You open a soup kitchen that feeds hungry people every day. You build a shelter where homeless people can sleep safely at night. You create job training programs that help unemployed people learn new skills. James looked at DeShawn with amazement. You're talking about giving away millions of dollars, he said. And you'll get back something worth more than millions of dollars, DeShawn replied. You'll get the respect of your community. You'll get the love of your family back. You'll get peace in your heart, knowing that you're using your wealth to make other people's lives better, instead of just making yourself richer. You'll sleep well at night, knowing that families have food on their table because of your kindness. DeShawn continued. You'll feel proud when you see homeless people get back on their feet because you gave them a chance. You'll understand what real success feels like when your children look at you with pride instead of disappointment. The security Guard walked over to where they were sitting. "Mr. Richardson, are you okay?" the guard asked with concern. "Should I call someone to help you? Should I call your doctor or your lawyer?" James looked up at the security guard and then looked at DeShawn sitting beside him. "Actually, yes, please." "Call my lawyer," James said with determination in his voice. "Tell him to start the paperwork immediately to reopen Richardson Manufacturing. And tell him we're going to need to hire 300 people as soon as possible." DeShawn smiled the biggest smile James had ever seen on another person's face. "Really?" DeShawn asked with excitement. "You're really going to do it? You're really going to reopen the factory?" "I'm going to do everything you suggested," James said with conviction. "I'm going to change the way I do business completely. I'm going to change the way I treat people. I'm going to change the way I live my life. But I can't do it alone." DeShawn looked confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I want to offer you a job," James said. "Not just any job, but a partnership. I want you to be my advisor and help me rebuild these companies the right way. I need someone who understands what regular people want and need. I need someone who can help me remember what really matters when I get tempted to go back to my old ways." DeShawn felt his heart racing with excitement and disbelief. "But I'm homeless," he said. "I don't have a college degree or business experience. I've been living on the streets for months." "That's exactly why I need you," James said earnestly. "You have something that all my college-educated advisors don't have. You have real wisdom about what makes people happy. You understand the consequences of bad business decisions because you lived through them. You know what it feels like to struggle, so you'll help me make decisions that actually help working families instead of hurting them. You have street-smart wisdom that no college can teach," James continued. "You understand people's hearts and what they really need to feel valued and respected. You can help me build businesses that serve people instead of just using them." DeShawn wiped tears of joy from his eyes. "Are you really serious about this?" he asked. "You really want to partner with a homeless man to rebuild your business empire?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my entire life," James said. "But first, let's get you some food and clean clothes and a place to live. Then we have the most important work of our lives to do together." As they walked out of the bank building together, James realized something that amazed him. Just 1 hour ago, he had thought his life was completely over. He had thought he had lost everything that mattered, and there was no way to fix the mess he had created. But actually, he had just found the most valuable thing of all. He had found a teacher who could show him how to be truly successful in the ways that actually matter in life. Over the next 6 months, James and DeShawn worked together 18 hours a day to rebuild everything from the ground up. They reopened Richardson Manufacturing with the best working conditions and highest wages in the city. Every employee got health insurance and paid vacation time. Workers were encouraged to share ideas for improving products and processes. The factory became known as the best place to work in the entire region. They lowered prices at all the Richardson stores so that working families could afford to shop there again. They hired employees who understood what regular customers wanted instead of just hiring people with fancy degrees. Customer satisfaction scores went through the roof as people felt respected and valued when they shopped at Richardson businesses. James sold 2 of his 3 mansions just like DeShawn had suggested. He sold 8 of his 10 cars and his expensive yacht. He used all that money to open a soup kitchen that fed 200 people every day. He built a homeless shelter that provided warm beds for 50 people every night. He created a job training center that taught unemployed people new skills and helped them find good jobs. Most importantly, James started spending his evenings and weekends with his family instead of at the office. He went to his children's school events and sports games. He had dinner with his family every night and asked them about their day. He put away his phone when his wife was talking to him and actually listened to what she was saying. Slowly over Many months his wife and children began to trust him again. They saw that he had truly changed from the inside out. They saw that he cared more about helping people than making money. They saw that he valued his relationships more than his possessions. They saw that he had become the husband and father they had always wanted him to be. The most amazing thing happened as James focused less on making money for himself. His businesses actually started making more money than they ever had before. People loved the new Richardson companies because they treated customers fairly and employees with respect. Sales went up every month as word spread about the positive changes. Stock prices reached all-time highs as investors realized these businesses were built to last. DeShawn moved into a beautiful apartment that James helped him find and furnish. But DeShawn never forgot where he came from or the lessons he had learned on the streets. Every morning before work, he went back to the bank steps where he used to sit begging for help. He talked to homeless people there and helped them find jobs and places to live. He became known throughout the city as the man who never forgot to help others even after his own life improved. 1 year after that rainy day when they first met, James stood with DeShawn in front of the reopened factory. 300 workers were inside making products that families all over the country could afford to buy. Next door, the soup kitchen was serving lunch to people who needed a hot meal. Across the street, the homeless shelter was preparing to welcome people who needed a safe place to sleep. "You know what the most amazing thing is?" James said to DeShawn as they watched all the good things happening around them. "I'm richer now than I ever was before. Not just in money, but in every way that actually matters in life. That's because you finally learned the secret that took me years to understand." DeShawn replied with a wise smile. "What secret is that?" James asked, even though he thought he already knew the answer. "True wealth isn't what you keep for yourself," DeShawn said. "True wealth is what you give away to help other people. The more you help others succeed and be happy, the richer you become in all the ways that matter. Money comes and goes, but the good you do for others lasts forever." James put his hand on DeShawn's shoulder with deep gratitude. "Thank you for saving my life," he said. "Thank you for teaching me what really matters. Thank you for showing me how to be truly successful." "You saved your own life," DeShawn replied. "I just helped you remember who you really were inside all along. I helped you find the good man that was always there but got lost under all that greed and selfishness." From that day forward, James Richardson became known throughout the city not as the richest man but as the most generous man. And DeShawn Williams became known not as a homeless beggar, but as the wise teacher who helped a lost billionaire find his way back home to what really mattered in life. The two men remained the closest friends for the rest of their lives, working together to help other people achieve success in all the ways that truly matter. They proved that sometimes the greatest teachers come from the most unexpected places. They proved that sometimes the person with the least money has the most wisdom to share. And they proved that true success is measured not by what you accumulate for yourself, but by how much good you do for others in this world.